Good evening. Welcome back to our second segment of the Glazov Gang. Our gang members this evening: Doris Wise Montrose, President of the Children of Jewish Holocaust Survivors; Ben Shapiro, Shillman Journalism Fellow at the David Horowitz Freedom Center; and Eric Allen Bell, writer and filmmaker. Glazov Gang members, welcome back to the Glazov Gang. The title of this show overall is To Build or Not to Build a Mosque in America. That's also a metaphor and very symbolic in general to the other issues we're going to discuss, how we balance our freedom, but at the same time protecting our security. Let's move on a little bit from that. We're going to touch on the freedom to build mosques, while at the same time these institutions are and could be being used to promote hate and destruction against the United States. Let's talk about immigration a little bit. Some people are caricatured as hate mongers and fascists for even bringing up or even raising the topic that we might have to be selective in who we allow into the country. But this is a real issue. Look what's happened in Europe. There are suburbs in Paris now, for instance, where women have to veil. Non-Muslim women are veiling or they get gang raped. Something can be said about certain populations coming into a country that have completely different values and are trying to destroy our values. But at the same time, how do we do this as a free society? Eric?
That's a tough one. I think, enforcing the laws that are on the books with regard to illegal immigration right here in Los Angeles would make a world of difference. At the time that I was born and entered the public school system, I don't know where California ranked in terms of scholastic achievement, but we're pretty close to number one. X million illegal aliens later, we're 40-something. So, there's real destruction that happens when there's giant waves of immigration, especially from parts of the world that don't share our values and destroy the character of our nation.
Absolutely. But Doris, the way that the left has molded the boundaries of debate in this country, even speaking like this now is considered hate speech.
Exactly
in some
right.
ways, we're not even allowed to speak anymore. How do you see this issue and in that context?
The immigration issue?
And not being even allowed to discuss it or even to even mention that maybe people of the Islamic faith should be looked into.
I think it's wrong, and I think that is where we self-inhibit our own freedom of speech. We're afraid to say things. There is no question when people want to come into this country, they need to go through a background check. Mm-hmm. When my parents wanted to come to the United States, they went through all kinds of checks, including were they healthy? Was there somebody here that they could support them, or was there a job available?
What ethnicity were your parents?
Jewish.
Is it fair to say that you can target Jews, you can target Christians, but if you do anything with Muslims today, you're automatically labeled a hate monger and a fascist?
Is it fair to say that's exactly what's happening? But it's not fair to say. Yeah,
right. It's not fair to say.
Fair, but it's. People just don't understand that the religious component of Islam is a small piece of Islam. The political component is enormous. Mm-hmm. So if somebody says, I'm immigrating and I'm a Muslim, mm-hmm. they're also telling you something about possibly their political ideology, and I think we have a right to really look into that in a post-9/11 era.
You know what, they started in Denmark because there's, gang rapes and attacks on the gay community, et cetera, et cetera. They actually started showing video, for instance, to Muslim immigrants, showing naked women on a beach, showing different things in the culture, and then telling them, if you're uncomfortable with this, do not come live here. Ben, what do you think about all this?
Being a citizen of the United States is an honor. Living here is an honor. My wife just became a citizen a couple months ago and went to the oath ceremony, and it's a beautiful thing. They say that, look, this is your country now. This is where you belong. There's certain values that attach to that. And I think that it's important, both the left and the right have bought into this Wilsonian notion that individuals all desire freedom. We all desire freedom and liberty. This is what Bush said, right? The human heart always reaches out to liberty. No, the human heart does not always reach out to liberty. People are trained in certain cultures, and it takes acclimation to new cultures in order to become part of that culture. Mm-hmm. Until America's willing to go back to the melting pot ideal as opposed to the kind of multicultural marbles in a bag ideal, we're all discreet, and we all have our own lifestyles, but there's no real American culture per se. Until we go back to that, immigration is going to remain a major problem. Until frankly, we become colonialist inside our own country, right? We're colonizing our own country with American ideology. We're going to have a serious issue here.
Ben, if all terrorist strikes against the United States, or almost all terrorist strikes, there's been more than 15,000 over the last 10 years, are perpetrated by Muslims, is it wrong to start banning and targeting the Muslim
community.
Profiling
is what you want, right?
Yeah.
Behavioral and religious profiling is what you're interested in. And I think that that's exactly what needs to happen. I mean, clearly.
So you support that?
Yeah, I mean, don't be an idiot, right? I mean, like, if somebody robs your house and the person is of a certain race or ethnicity, you tell the cops what race or ethnicity the person was, and then the cops go look for a person of that race or ethnicity. I mean, the fact is that people of Islamic descent have been largely responsible for terrorism in this country over the last 10, 15 years, 20 years, and to just not recognize that is willful ignorance, and it's stupid, and it puts American lives at risk. Again, if you're a law-abiding Muslim, you want to come here, you want to be part of our culture, you want to be free, terrific, welcome, join us. But the burden is on you to show that you belong here, not on us to bring you in.
So
even at airports.
I think that's just to be politically correct. I think that's just all for show to say, look, we're not singling anybody out. But over the last few X number of decades, every single time an airplane is hijacked, it's Muslims. So is it really unfair to say, Muslims, if you get on an airplane, we're really going to look into every single one of you? Be foolish not to. I think foolish not to. And, we'll take some heat for it. But
what has happened in our society that the people who speak like you three at this moment are called names and smeared as fascists and racists, etc.?
What happens is it takes a few courageous people to be able to stand up to that until we reach critical mass and more people are able to say, I stand behind him, I agree. And then it becomes an acceptable conversation for us to have.
And I think it's a hangover from, look, race and ethnicity have been a toxic conversation in the country for good reason for the last 50 years. I mean, because of the problematic racial history of the United States since inception. So people are very scared of the issue of race. People are very scared of the issue of ethnicity and culture. These are things that have been used as an excuse to mistreat people. So, I think that the left, but in typical, the left had a point at one point, but in typical leftist fashion, they've gone way too far over to the other side. So now you're not even allowed to make, routine points about things that are eminently true. And again, I think that as a new generation rises up, as people who are younger and who are clearly... I was brought up in a post-racial home. I mean, I don't even think... And people my age don't even think in terms of race as a general matter. And polls show this. I mean, people who are 70, 80, tend to think of race more than people who are 20 or 30. People who are 20 or 30... In terms of, blatant racism, thinking that people of another culture or religion or race are inherently bad or evil or problematic, that it just doesn't compute. The idea that somebody is, stupider because they're from a certain race, it doesn't make any sense to people who are my age.
But it has to start making sense in terms of quote-unquote religion, because to actually say in our society, our civilization is better than Islam.
Well, right, and I think that it's important.
The Judeo-Christian tradition is superior to Islam. That's almost anathema in our culture, because the left controls our culture, and all religions are equal.
The left has linked race, and the left has linked race and ethnicity to culture and religion, and that's a false linkage. It's an absolutely false linkage.
If we remain asleep, Doris, let me begin with you. There are those watching this show and in general in our society that say these are all paranoid right-wingers. It's the Ku Klux Klan that poses the greatest threat. It's the Timothy McVeighs that pose the greatest threat. Islam is not a threat. What would you say? Is there a real threat? How is there a real threat? And if we remain asleep, again, what may happen if we don't act?
There is a real threat. It's a recognized threat. It's a virtually a proven threat. And if we don't acknowledge it, and all of us together, and shows like this are very helpful, because if people hear people like Eric talking and saying things like that, it will give them the strength to say it too, because that's really all it takes is hearing somebody say it, then somebody else will say it, and then somebody else will say it. And the more we say these things, the more the left will be silenced. They won't be so loud anymore. But we definitely have to soon pay attention to what's going on.
Absolutely. And one thing, Eric, that you've been stressing is we have to get into the media, because you've even admitted that 1 or 2 years ago you were naive in terms of even the Arab Spring in Egypt. You thought it was a great thing until a taxi driver that was Christian told you that he was terrified. So it's about the media not informing people.
I looked at the Arab Spring as a class struggle. And I thought, this is fantastic. Or, Hosni Mubarak's worth $70 billion. Look at how at least a third of his people are living. This will be great. What I didn't know, because I was naive, was who will replace him. By fair democratic elections, the people will vote for something insane,
but this
which is the Muslim Brotherhood and Sharia law.
They do have fair democratic elections.
That's what I'm saying.
But there was an election.
But they vote in a way that's psychotic.
But there was a vote.
I know. Let's replace them with the Muslim Brotherhood.
And there was a vote with Hitler as well. There was a vote with Hamas. But as what Ben was saying earlier, there's this belief that, once given the chance, people will jump at freedom. Being from the Soviet Union, I can tell you that after the fall of the Soviet Union, there's many Russians that are just dying to restore Stalinist statues all over the Soviet Union. Let's finish this segment. Ben, your final thoughts on this in terms of the threat, in terms of how the left strangles our ability to protect ourselves?
I mean, I think that civilizations hollow themselves from the inside before the barbarians are at the gates. And we've been hollowing ourselves out from the inside for a long time now. I mean, when we look at things like the Arab Spring, we see it in terms of class struggle as opposed to seeing it for what it really is, which is a chaotic religious turmoil over there. Then what we're really doing is blinding ourselves to the facts of the situation in the name of political correctness. We spent the last 50 to 100 years building up the idea in the United States that elites ought to run us and that the common people who have common sense should shut the hell up. And in doing so, we've robbed ourselves of what makes us uniquely American. When we do that, we make ourselves intensely vulnerable to outsiders who want to harm us.
Doris?
I agree with what Ben said.
Is it a matter of cowardice or ignorance?
Cowardice.
Cowardice?
Yeah. I think that a lot of people actually know what's going on. They see it. They're afraid. In terms of giving a report card on a scale of 1 to 10 to Obama, how has he helped or hurt this situation? 1 being the worst. The worst? Minus. In the minuses? Oh, absolutely. Eric, conclusion for this segment.
I think Obama's been a disaster across the board. I voted for Obama in 2008.
And you're still welcome on the Glazov gang.
I won't be voting for him again. But, I've also lost my faith in the entire electoral process. I believe most of politics is, frankly, smoke and mirrors. It's not like I see somebody better out there. I just think he's been a disaster, and it's been a real awakening for me to realize that he's the PR wing of a group of people who I don't even know who they are.
Thank you very much. Join us tomorrow evening for the third segment of the Glazov Gang, and we're going to continue this discussion on Obama and his role in making us vulnerable in terms of the threats we face. Join us tomorrow evening. Good night.